The Jarun flagship, Jacorum, emerged from the swirling vortex of a wormhole, its sleek biomechanical form pulsing with an eerie blue light. As the massive vessel decelerated, hundreds of smaller craft swarmed around it like a protective cloud of insects. Grand Executor Kha'Zix, the fleet's commander, gazed at the unfamiliar star patterns of the Milky Way through the ship's panoramic view screen. "Status report," he demanded, his voice a guttural growl that reverberated through the bridge. A junior officer approached, bowing deeply. "Grand Executor, long-range scans detect multiple inhabited systems within our reach. Most appear to be developing civilizations, hardly worth our attention." Kha'Zix's eyes narrowed. "Any sign of the humans?" The mere mention of the species sent a ripple of disgust through the bridge crew. Humans were known throughout the galaxies as a primitive, barely spacefaring race, more of a curiosity than a threat. Yet their reputation for unpredictability had piqued the Jarun's interest. "Yes, Grand Executor. We've detected 3 distant colonies, each on the fringes of different star systems." A predatory grin spread across Kha'Zix's face. "Excellent. Set course for the nearest one. It's time we see these humans for ourselves." As the Jarun fleet approached the first colony, they maintained a cautious distance. The planet was a small, rocky world with a thin atmosphere, its surface dotted with gleaming domes and interconnected structures. Scans revealed a population of merely 10,000, hardly a threat to the mighty Jarun. "Curious," mused Kha'Zix. "Their technology seems advanced for such a primitive species. Initiate a deep scan of their genetic and technological makeup." The results of the scan sent shockwaves through the Jarun fleet. As data streamed across the view screens, disbelief turned to horror, then to rage. This cannot be!" Kha'Zix roared, his claws digging into the armrests of his command chair. "Run the analysis again!" But each subsequent scan only confirmed the impossible truth. The genetic markers of the humans bore an unmistakable similarity to those of the Jarun. More disturbingly, fragments of code within human technology matched ancient Jarun systems so old they predated their own recorded history. For millennia, they had believed themselves to be the pinnacle of evolution, born from the cosmic crucible of creation itself. Their origin myths spoke of ancient star gods breathing life into the first Jarun, bestowing upon them the divine right to rule the universe. But now, faced with irrefutable evidence, those cherished beliefs crumbled like sandcastles before a rising tide. Kha'Zix's mind reeled as he grappled with the implications. If humans had created the Jarun, what did that make his people? Were they merely tools, experiments, or perhaps even discarded failures? Their supposed divine origin was now called into question. It was a truth too terrible to contemplate, yet impossible to ignore. As the Grand Executor stared at the damning data, a cold realization crept over him. The Jarun's entire history, their conquests, their sense of destiny, all of it might be based on a lie. The implications were clear, yet unthinkable. These insignificant creatures, these humans, had not just encountered the Jarun in some forgotten past, but maybe they had even created them. Kha'Zix's fury knew no bounds. "This is a trick, a deception. Move to the next colony. We'll expose this lie for what it is." But as the fleet analyzed the second and third human colonies, the evidence only mounted. Each settlement, though separated by vast distances, showed the same genetic and technological links to the Jarun. In the depths of space, far from the prying eyes of the humans, the Jarun leadership convened an emergency council. Holographic projections of the fleet's highest-ranking officers flickered to life around Grand Executor Kha'Zix. "We cannot accept this," growled General Vexmore, his massive form towering over the others. "The very idea that our noble race could have sprung from such vermin is an insult to our lineage." "Perhaps," suggested Science Officer Zinthar, her voice calm but strained. "We should attempt communication. If there is truth to this, we might learn." "Silence!" Kha'Zix's roar cut through the debate. "We are the Jarun. We bow to no one, least of all these pitiful humans. There is only one course of action that befits our honor." A hush fell over the assembly as Kha'Zix's words sank in. Then, one by one, the officers nodded their agreement. "We will strike," Kha'Zix continued, his voice low and menacing. "We will eradicate these colonies, this entire race, wipe away this insult to our very existence, and in doing so, we will prove our supremacy once and for all." The attack, when it came, was as swift as it was merciless. The Jarun fleet descended upon the first human colony like a storm of vengeance. Energy weapons lanced out, shattering the protective domes and vaporizing structures in seconds. Inside the colony, alarms blared as the inhabitants scrambled for safety. Men, women, and children rushed through corridors, seeking shelter that would prove futile against the onslaught. Security forces mobilized, their weapons pitifully inadequate against the technological might of the Jarun. From his command chair, Kha'Zix watched the destruction with sadistic satisfaction. "See how easily they fall," he sneered, eyes gleaming with malice. "These are not our creators. They are nothing but insects beneath our feet, waiting to be crushed." As the colony crumbled, a lone human ship managed to break away from the planet's surface. It was a small vessel, clearly not designed for combat, yet it flew with a desperate agility that surprised even the Jarun gunners. "Destroy that ship," Kha'Zix ordered, a note of annoyance in his voice. But the human pilot was skilled, perhaps driven by sheer terror and the need to warn others. The ship dodged and weaved through the barrage of Jarun fire, making for the edge of the system. "Impossible," muttered one of the bridge officers. "How can they—" A blinding flash cut off his words as the human ship suddenly accelerated to faster-than-light speeds, vanishing from sensors. Kha'Zix's eyes narrowed. "It matters not. They have nowhere to run. Set course for the next colony. We will not rest until all traces of this human filth are wiped from existence." The Jarun fleet moved like a relentless tide, sweeping from one human colony to the next. Each attack was more brutal than the last, as if the invaders were trying to erase not just the humans, but the very idea of their existence. At the second colony, the humans had managed to activate some form of planetary shield. For a brief moment, it seemed as though they might have a chance to resist. But the Jarun's weapons, honed through centuries of warfare, tore through the defenses as if they were made of paper. The third colony, perhaps warned by some desperate transmission, attempted to evacuate. Ships of all sizes rose from the planet's surface, laden with civilians hoping to escape the carnage. The Jarun fighters fell upon them like wolves, tearing the refugee fleet to shreds. As the last human structure collapsed into rubble, Grand Executor Kha'Zix allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. "It is done," he announced to his fleet. "We have cleansed this sector of the human taint." But even as the words left his mouth, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. These humans, weak as they were, had shown flashes of ingenuity in their desperation. The ship that escaped, the planetary shield, the evacuation attempt, each spoke of a resourcefulness that the Jarun had not expected. "Grand Executor," called out the sensor officer, interrupting Kha'Zix's thoughts. "We're detecting a faint transmission from the debris field. It appears to be a distress signal." Kha'Zix leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Oh, and who do these pathetic creatures think will save them now?" But as the contents of the transmission were decoded, the Grand Executor's confidence gave way to a creeping unease. The message was not a plea for help, but a warning. Detailed information about the Jarun fleet, their weapons, their tactics, all broadcast on frequencies that stretched far beyond this sector of space. For the first time since entering the Milky Way, Grand Executor Kha'Zix felt a twinge of something he had never experienced before: fear. "Now," somewhere out in the vast expanse of this foreign galaxy, others would know of the Jarun's coming. The hunt, it seemed, was just beginning. The distress beacon pulsed through the void, its encrypted message racing ahead of the Jarun's devastating wake. Light years away, on the outer rim of human-controlled space, a solitary outpost stirred to life. Maggie, the station's AI, processed the incoming data with inhuman speed, her circuits humming with urgency. Alert! Priority 1 distress signal detected. Maggie's synthesized voice echoed through the station's corridors. Multiple colonies under attack. Unknown hostile force. Awakening crew from stasis. In the depths of the station, cryopods hissed open. Captain Jake Forrester stumbled out, his mind still foggy from hibernation. Report, Maggie. What's the situation? The AI's holographic form materialized before him, her expression grim. Captain, we've received a distress call from the Epsilon sector. 3 colonies have been destroyed by an unknown alien force. The data packet contains crucial information about the attackers. Jake's eyes widened as he absorbed the information scrolling across the nearest screen. My God, their technology, their weapons. How did our colonies even manage to get this data out? The last transmission indicates that a single ship escaped the initial assault, Maggie explained. They sacrificed themselves to ensure this information reached us. Jake's jaw clenched. Then we damn well better make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. Maggie, initiate the Clarion Protocol. We need to alert every human world, station, and ship in the galaxy, and get me a direct line to Earth Central Command. As the outpost erupted into frenzied activity, the warning spread like wildfire through human space. On countless worlds, in space stations, and aboard starships, the same scene played out. Alarms blared, emergency briefings convened, and humanity began to mobilize on a scale unseen in generations. On Earth, the heart of human civilization, the response was swift and decisive. In the cavernous war room of Central Command, holographic displays flickered to life, showing the full extent of the Jarun threat. General Ivan Cox, a battle-hardened veteran of a dozen interstellar conflicts, addressed the assembled military leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, we face an enemy of unprecedented power and cruelty. The Jarun have already destroyed 3 of our colonies, and they show no signs of stopping. We must act now, and we must act together. The voices of the leaders filled the room as strategies were proposed and debated. Some advocated for immediate retaliation, while others urged caution and further intelligence gathering. Admiral Rachel Keegan, her face etched with lines of worry, spoke up. We need to evacuate our outer colonies immediately. We can't risk losing more civilian lives while we prepare our counter-offensive. Agreed, Cox nodded. But we also need to buy time. We'll deploy our rapid response fleets to harass and delay the Jarun advance. Every second we gain is another life saved, another ship prepared for battle. As the meeting progressed, a young lieutenant burst into the room, his face pale. Sirs, we've just received word from the Arcturus system. They're under attack. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Arcturus was no mere colony. It was a major industrial hub, home to millions and a linchpin in humanity's defense network. Cox's eyes hardened. It's time to call in every favor we're owed. Contact the Galactic Council. We need allies, and we need them now. Across the galaxy, humanity's diplomats sprang into action. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 languages, they pleaded their case to alien governments. Some responded with sympathy, others with indifference, and a few with outright hostility. On the verdant world of Zalthor, Ambassador Jessica Altman faced the ruling council of the Krelat, a race of 6 armed beings known for their advanced biotechnology. Honored elders, Jessica began, her voice steady despite the stakes. Humanity stands on the brink of annihilation. The Jarun threat is not ours alone. If they succeed in destroying us, who among you believes they will stop there? The Krelat chittered among themselves, their compound eyes flashing with conflicting emotions. Finally, the eldest among them spoke. We have long valued our neutrality, Ambassador, but perhaps there are times when one must take a stand. Similar scenes played out across known space. The warrior clans of Tothrak pledged their battle fleets. The Ixari Collective offered their vast network of hyperspace beacons. Even the notoriously isolationist Zen-La broke their centuries-long silence to offer aid. As allies rallied to humanity's cause, a sense of hope began to spread. But with it came a dawning realization of the true scale of the conflict to come. In a secure bunker beneath the Martian capital, the newly formed United Defense Council convened its first meeting. Representatives from Earth, Mars, and a dozen colony worlds gathered around a massive holotable, their faces grim but determined. Dr. Carl Bennett, Earth's foremost xenobiologist, presented his findings on the Jarun. Their biology is remarkable, advanced beyond anything we've encountered. But there's something else, something in their genetic structure that seems almost familiar. Before he could elaborate, the holotable flared to life with a priority transmission. The grizzled face of Admiral Pearson, commander of the Arcturus Defense Fleet, filled the display. "Council members, I don't have much time." Pearson's voice crackled with static. "The Jarun, their tactics, their technology, it's like nothing we've ever faced. We're holding for now, but barely. We need reinforcements, and we need them yesterday." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving the council in stunned silence. It was Councillor Dmitry McAllister who finally broke the tension. "We cannot fight this war as separate nations, separate colonies. We need a unified command, a single strategy." Agreement rippled through the room. Within hours, the Terran Alliance was born, a coalition government representing all of humanity, dedicated to the singular purpose of survival. As the alliance took shape, the first counteroffensive was already underway. Operation Firebreak, a desperate bid to slow the Jarun advance, launched from secret bases across the galactic arm. On the ships of the Jarun fleet, Grand Executor Kha'Zix stood on the command bridge of the Jarkorum. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the debris field of the recently conquered human world. The destruction brought him a sense of satisfaction, yet a nagging unease lingered in the back of his mind. These humans, despite their apparent inferiority, had managed to transmit a warning before their demise. It was unexpected. "Status report," Kha'Zix demanded, his voice a low growl that sent ripples of tension through the bridge crew. Sub-Commander Kaljor approached, bowing deeply. "Grand Executor, our fleets have secured the system. No signs of human survivors or—" He hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously. "Or any unusual activity." Kha'Zix's eyes narrowed further. "You seem uncertain, Sub-Commander. Explain." Kaljor straightened, his exoskeleton plates shifting uneasily. "It's just, our long-range sensors have detected intermittent anomalies, brief energy spikes that don't match any known human signatures. They could be nothing, but you thought it worth mentioning," Kha'Zix finished. "Very well. Increase sensor sweeps and alert all ships to be on guard for—" His words were cut short as the bridge suddenly plunged into darkness. For a moment, there was only silence, then a cacophony of alarmed chittering as the emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the command center in an eerie red glow. "Report!" Kha'Zix roared, his claws digging into the armrests of his command throne. "Unknown energy surge, Grand Executor." The sensor officer's voice was tinged with panic. It's affecting all systems. Shields are down, weapons offline. We're defenseless." Kha'Zix rose, his towering form casting long shadows in the dim light. Impossible. How could these primitive creatures— A flash of movement caught his eye. Through the view screen, he saw other ships in the fleet listing, their lights flickering and dying. It was as if some invisible hand had reached out and stripped away their power. "All ships, report status," Kha'Zix commanded, but only static answered his call. For long moments, the bridge crew worked feverishly, trying to restore systems and understand what had happened. Gradually, emergency power was restored, and reports began to trickle in from across the fleet. Sub-Commander Kaljor approached once more, his posture now one of defeat. Grand Executor, it appears we were struck by some form of energy weapon. A energy disruptor, our scientists believe. It's technology we've never encountered before. Kha'Zix's rage built like a rising storm. How? How could these vermin possess such weapons? We are the Jarun. We are supreme. As if in answer to his outburst, a transmission cut through the static on the comms. It was brief, in the human tongue, but the translation matrices quickly deciphered its meaning. Control, this is Shadow Dancer. Operation Firebreak is a go. The disruptor works. The implications sank in. The humans had not only managed to strike back, but had done so with a precision and effectiveness that should have been beyond their capabilities. They had slipped past the Jarun's defenses, deployed a weapon of terrifying power, and vanished like ghosts. Kha'Zix's fury knew no bounds. He lashed out, his claws rending through a nearby console in a shower of sparks. "Find them!" he roared. "I want every ship, every scanner looking for this Shadow Dancer. These humans dare to challenge us? We will show them the true meaning of war." But even as he issued his commands, a cold realization settled in the pit of his stomach. The humans were not the easy prey they had appeared to be. They were adaptable, resourceful, and now, demonstrably dangerous. As the Jarun fleet struggled to recover from the attack, reports flooded in from across their conquered territories. Human resistance was growing, coordinated and fierce. The ease of their initial victories now seemed like a distant memory. Kha'Zix knew he needed to act decisively. He could not allow this setback to undermine the Jarun's sense of superiority. With a snarl, he activated the ship-wide communication system. "Hear me, warriors of the Jarun," his voice boomed through every vessel in the fleet. "Today, we have tasted the desperation of a dying race. The humans, in their final throes, have lashed out with borrowed technology and cowards' tactics. But we are the Jarun. We have conquered galaxies and extinguished stars. These vermin think they can challenge us? They have only awakened the full might of our wrath." A chorus of fierce approval echoed through the ships. Kha'Zix allowed himself a grim smile before continuing. "Prepare the Jakalar, the world breaker. It's time to show these humans the true meaning of power. We will shatter their worlds, burn their cities, and erase their very memory from the cosmos. The Jarun reign supreme, now and always." As the fleet bustled with renewed purpose, Kha'Zix turned his gaze to the stars. Somewhere out there, the humans were gathering their forces, rallying allies, preparing for a war they couldn't possibly win. But for the first time since entering this galaxy, Kha'Zix felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Doubt. As the Jarun fleet regrouped, their sensors swept the debris field for any sign of the human vessel that had so brazenly attacked them. Grand Executor Kha'Zix paced the bridge of the Jakorum, his claws clicking against the metallic floor in a rhythm that set his subordinates on edge. "Nothing, Grand Executor," the sensor officer reported, his voice quivering. "The human ship has vanished without a trace." Kha'Zix snarled, his eyes blazing with fury. "Impossible. No primitive race could possess such technology. Expand the search parameters. I want that ship found." But as hours stretched into days, the elusive Shadow Dancer remained a phantom, taunting the mighty Jarun fleet with its absence. Reports of similar attacks began to trickle in from across their conquered territories. Human resistance cells, emboldened by the success of Operation Firebreak, were striking with unprecedented coordination and effectiveness. On a distant Jarun outpost, a seemingly innocuous asteroid suddenly changed course, revealing itself to be a camouflaged human strike craft. Before the stunned alien garrison could react, the vessel unleashed a barrage of missiles, each warhead containing a payload of nanites programmed to target and disable Jarun technology. Within minutes, the outpost's defenses were reduced to useless scrap, leaving it vulnerable to a swift and decisive ground assault. Back on the Jakorum, Kha'Zix received the news with growing disbelief. "How?" he roared, smashing a holographic display. "How are these vermin outmaneuvering us at every turn?" Sub-Commander Kaljor, his exoskeleton still bearing scorch marks from their recent encounter, ventured a response. "Grand Executor, our initial analysis suggests that the humans are adapting. They're using our own tactics against us, but with variations we couldn't have predicted." Kha'Zix's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Their attacks defy logical patterns," Kaljor continued. "Where we expect them to retreat, they advance. When we prepare for a frontal assault, they strike from behind. It's as if they're not following any established doctrine of warfare." The implications were unsettling. The Jarun, with their hive-mind approach to strategy, had always relied on predictable, efficient tactics. But these humans, they were chaos incarnate. As the Jarun struggled to adapt, humanity pressed its advantage. On the colony world of New Dawn, Dr. Timothy Tanner stood before a gathering of Earth's brightest minds, his holographic display showing the schematics of a Jarun dreadnought. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady despite the weight of their task. "We've analyzed every scrap of data from our encounters with the Jarun. Their technology is advanced, yes, but not infallible. We've identified key vulnerabilities that we can exploit." The room buzzed with excitement as Dr. Tanner detailed their findings. The Jarun ships, while formidable, relied heavily on a centralized power distribution network. Disrupt that, and entire sections of their vessels could be rendered inert. "But how do we get close enough to exploit these weaknesses?" Admiral Keegan asked, her brow furrowed. A young engineer named Lewis Morris stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with barely contained excitement. "We don't have to," he said, activating a hologram of his own. "We've developed a series of autonomous drones, each no larger than a coffee mug. They can slip through the gaps in Jarun shields and attach themselves to their hull." The hologram showed the drones in action, burrowing into a Jarun ship like mechanical parasites. Once attached, they'll emit a targeted EMP pulse, frying the ship's systems from the inside out. The room erupted in applause, but Dr. Tanner raised a hand for silence. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We need to think bigger, more unconventionally. The Jarun expect us to fight like them. We need to show them how humans wage war." Over the next weeks, humanity's ingenuity was on full display. On the jungle world of Verdant, human forces lured a Jarun landing party into a trap. As the aliens advanced through the dense foliage, the very plants seemed to come alive, ensnaring their limbs and shorting out their weapons. It was only after the skirmish that the Jarun realized the truth. The humans had seeded the jungle with millions of microscopic robots, turning the entire ecosystem into a weapon. In the dense asteroid fields of the Helios cluster, a remote mining outpost on the fringes of human space, resourceful workers repurposed their industrial equipment into makeshift weapons of war. Gravity tethers, normally used to guide ore-rich asteroids, were now flinging massive chunks of space rock at Jarun ships with devastating accuracy. The alien fleet found itself navigating a deadly obstacle course where every piece of debris became a potential missile. The Jarun, accustomed to open space warfare, were ill-prepared for this improvised minefield, their superior technology offering little advantage against the ingenious tactics of the human miners. But perhaps the most audacious plan came from an unlikely source. Captain Harold Bjornsson, a former freighter pilot turned resistance leader, proposed using the Jarun's own FTL technology against them. "Their faster-than-light drives create a bubble of warped space-time," he explained to a skeptical council. "If we can predict where they'll emerge from FTL, we can lay a trap." The plan was insane, relying on split-second timing and calculations so complex they pushed the limits of human supercomputers. But in the end, desperation won out over caution. The trap was set in the Arcturus system, where the Jarun had established a major supply depot. As their reinforcement fleet dropped out of FTL, they found themselves surrounded not by empty space, but by a carefully constructed web of gravitational anomalies. The human fleet had used repurposed mining equipment to create a maze of spatial distortions, turning the very fabric of space-time into a weapon. Jarun ships collided with invisible barriers, their hulls buckling under forces they couldn't comprehend. Those that managed to avoid immediate destruction found themselves hopelessly entangled, unable to maneuver or bring their weapons to bear. From the bridge of his commandeered Jarun cruiser, Captain Bjornsson watched the chaos unfold. "All ships, engage!" he ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The human fleet struck with precision, their weapons guided by targeting systems that had been fine-tuned to exploit the Jarun's vulnerabilities. Plasma beams lanced out, finding gaps in alien shields that shouldn't have existed. Missiles corkscrewed through space in patterns that defied prediction, slamming into vital systems with unerring accuracy. In the span of minutes, the pride of the Jarun Navy was reduced to floating debris. As the last enemy ship flickered and died, a cheer went up across the human fleet. It was more than a victory. It was proof that humanity could not only survive, but triumph against overwhelming odds. Back on the Jacorum, Grand Executor Kha'Zix received the news of the defeat with cold fury. "Impossible," he hissed, his claws digging furrows into his command chair. "How could these vermins?" But even as he raged, a part of him knew the truth. The humans were not fighting like any enemy the Jarun had faced before. They were unpredictable, innovative, and above all, relentless. Now, for the second time in his long life, Kha'Zix felt an emotion felt for the first time here in this galaxy: fear. As reports of human victories spread across the galaxy, hope began to flourish in the most unlikely places. On occupied worlds, resistance movements grew bolder, inspired by tales of human ingenuity. Among the Jarun's vassal races, whispers of rebellion began to circulate. But the war was far from over. The Jarun still held a significant technological advantage, and their numbers were vast. As Kha'Zix gathered his war council to plan their next move, he made a solemn vow. The humans had proven themselves worthy adversaries, but in doing so they had sealed their fate. The Jarun would bring the full might of their empire to bear, and this time there would be no mercy. Humanity, against all odds, had won its first major victories, but the true test of their resilience and ingenuity was yet to come. The Jarun were wounded, but far from defeated, and their retaliation would be terrible to behold. As news of the victory at Arcturus spread, a renewed sense of purpose swept through human space. On countless worlds, in laboratories and factories, on starships and space stations, the fires of innovation burned bright. The impossible had been achieved. The mighty Jarun fleet had been bloodied, their aura of invincibility shattered. Dr. Tanner's team worked tirelessly, reverse engineering captured Jarun technology and combining it with human tactics. The result was a new generation of weapons and defenses that pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. "We're not just adapting their tech," Dr. Tanner explained to a gathering of military leaders. "We're improving it, finding applications they never imagined." He unveiled a prototype of a personal shield generator, small enough to be worn as a wristband. "By studying the Jarun's energy manipulation techniques, we've created a device that can project a force field strong enough to deflect their plasma weapons. But here's the kicker. It can also be modulated to pass specific frequencies, allowing our own weapons to fire through it unimpeded." The implications were staggering. Human soldiers, once helpless against Jarun firepower, could now stand toe-to-toe with the alien warriors. But it wasn't just in technology that humanity found its edge. The diversity of human cultures and thinking styles, once seen as a weakness by the hive-minded Jarun, proved to be an invaluable asset. On the waterworld of Poseidon, where the Jarun had established a major base, human forces employed tactics inspired by Earth's ancient naval battles. Submarines, thought obsolete in the age of space warfare, were repurposed and enhanced with space travel technology. They struck from the depths, their presence masked by the planet's vast oceans, emerging only to launch devastating attacks before disappearing beneath the waves. In the crowded urban sprawl of New Shanghai, a thriving colony in the Tau Ceti system, resistance fighters transformed the city into a formidable battleground. Every street became a potential ambush site, every building a makeshift fortress. The Jarun, accustomed to open warfare, found themselves mired in a grueling urban conflict. Their technological superiority offered little advantage in the narrow alleys and towering skyscrapers of this human-designed metropolis. The colonists, intimately familiar with every nook and cranny of their adopted home, used this knowledge to devastating effect, turning the alien invaders' advanced weapons and tactics against them in the claustrophobic urban environment. On board the Jacorum, Grand Executor Kha'Zix stood before the strategic holomap, his eyes narrowed as he absorbed the latest reports of human resistance. The flickering lights representing Jarun strongholds were fewer than they had been mere cycles ago, each extinguished point a stinging reminder of their unexpected setbacks. Sub-Commander Kalzor approached cautiously, mandibles clicking nervously. Grand Executor, our analysis teams have compiled their findings on human combat strategies. They are erratic, unpredictable. Kha'Zix turned, his eyes blazing. Elaborate. Our forces are struggling to adapt to their unconventional tactics, sir, Kalzor replied, his voice lowered. The humans employ no recognizable doctrine of warfare. Kha'Zix's tail lashed in agitation. And our losses? Substantial, Grand Executor, Kalzor admitted reluctantly. Kha'Zix hissed, a sound that sent shivers through the bridge crew. Unacceptable. We are the Jarun. We have conquered galaxies. We will not be undone by these insects. He strode to the command interface, inputting a series of codes. The holomap shifted, displaying the full might of the Jarun Empire. Countless worlds, fleets, and production facilities flickered to life. Enact Emergency Protocol Jakalar, Kha'Zix ordered. I want every shipyard working at maximum capacity. Recall our frontier fleets. We will crush these humans with overwhelming force. As the orders were relayed across subspace, Kha'Zix turned back to the holomap. His claw traced the trajectory of the Jarun's planned assault, a path that would burn a swathe of destruction through human-controlled space. The Jarun armada descended upon the Sirius system like a storm of vengeance. Grand Executor Kha'Zix, his pride wounded by the recent defeats, had committed the full might of his fleet to this assault. Hundreds of battleships dropped out of FTL, their hulls gleaming with otherworldly energies. Let the wretches feel the true power of the Jarun, Kha'Zix snarled, his claws digging into the arms of his command chair. No more games, no more mercy. Burn their worlds to ash. As the alien fleet advanced, Kha'Zix watched with growing unease as the human defenders assumed a formation he had never encountered before. Their ships moved with a fluidity that defied the Jarun's tactical algorithms, weaving in and out of formation in patterns that seemed chaotic, yet purposeful. Just as the Jarun fleet prepared to unleash their first salvo, a shimmering distortion appeared at the edge of the system. Through it emerged a flotilla of ships, unlike anything Kha'Zix had ever seen. Their hulls seemed to bend light around them, making it difficult for even the advanced Jarun sensors to get a clear reading. Impossible, Kha'Zix hissed. The humans have allies. How did they manage to contact other species without our knowledge? The new arrivals, which Kha'Zix would later learn were called the Ixari, immediately engaged in the battle. Their weapons seemed to ignore Jarun shields entirely, phasing through them as if they weren't there. The carefully planned Jarun assault quickly devolved into chaos as they struggled to adapt to this new threat. Kha'Zix watched in disbelief as a human flagship, later identified as the HMS Excalibur, executed a maneuver that should have been impossible given the limitations of their technology. The ship seemed to dance between Jarun energy beams, closing the distance to one of their dreadnoughts with alarming speed. All ships, focus fire on that human vessel, Kha'Zix roared. But even as he gave the order, he saw the Ixari ships creating some kind of energy field around the human fleet, deflecting the Jarun attacks with ease. The battle that ensued was unlike anything the Jarun had ever experienced. Human ships darted and weaved, their movements unpredictable, guided by a mix of strategies that Kha'Zix couldn't begin to comprehend. Every time the Jarun adapted to one tactic, the humans would switch to another, keeping them constantly off balance. As the conflict spread across the system, Kha'Zix received reports of similar scenes playing out in other sectors. On a jungle world that the Jarun had thought secured, their ground forces found themselves bogged down in a nightmarish guerrilla war. The forest itself seemed to come alive, with camouflaged human resistors striking from impossible angles before melting away into the undergrowth. In the dense asteroid fields of the Hydra cluster, far from any star system, Jarun supply lines came under constant harassment. Human mining ships, repurposed into nimble attack craft, used their intimate knowledge of the treacherous terrain to devastating effect. Each ambush, each hit-and-run attack chipped away at the invaders' morale. What infuriated Kha'Zix most was how quickly the humans seemed to be adapting Jarun technology for their own use. In one skirmish, he watched in disbelief as a human cruiser suddenly deployed an energy shield that was unmistakably based on Jarun designs, but with modifications that made it even more effective against their own weapons. "How?" he snarled. "How are they reverse engineering our technology so quickly? It should take them years, decades to understand our systems." But the innovations didn't stop there. In every engagement, the Jarun encountered new and unexpected challenges. Human weapons began to bypass their shields with increasing regularity. Their communications, once thought unbreakable, were now being jammed and intercepted. Even their vaunted biotech was being turned against them, with human forces deploying countermeasures that seemed tailored to exploit weaknesses the Jarun didn't even know they had. As the war ground on, Kha'Zix found himself increasingly frustrated. The hive mind approach to strategy that had served the Jarun for millennia now proved to be a critical weakness. They couldn't adapt fast enough to the constantly shifting tactics of the human-led alliance. In a desperate bid to turn the tide of war, Kha'Zix ordered the redeployment of the Jakalar, the world-breaker superweapon that had guaranteed countless victories in the early stages of the conflict. This planet-shattering behemoth, which had once struck terror into the hearts of their enemies, was now their last hope. Escorted by a fleet of elite guardians, the massive vessel set course for a major human stronghold. But even the Jakalar, their ultimate weapon, was met with a response that left Kha'Zix questioning everything he thought he knew about warfare. As the dreaded superweapon approached its target, expecting to face the same helpless resistance it had easily crushed before, it was instead intercepted by a human task force led by the now infamous HMS Excalibur. What followed was a battle that defied all of Kha'Zix's expectations. Human ships darted between the Jarun defenders with impossible precision, their movements coordinated in a way that spoke of a level of cooperation the Jarun had never achieved. The Ixari vessels phased in and out of reality, striking at the Jakalar's weak points before vanishing. And then, just when Kha'Zix thought he had seen everything, a new player entered the field. Massive, organic-looking ships latched onto Jarun vessels, their living hulls secreting something that ate through even the toughest armor. Kha'Zix would later learn these were Krelot bioships, yet another ally the humans had somehow managed to recruit. At the heart of the maelstrom, the Excalibur led a daring assault on the Jakalar itself. Kha'Zix watched, his mandibles clicking in agitation, as the human flagship wove through a storm of Jarun fire, each near miss causing his hearts to skip a beat. How could a lesser species pilot their ships with such skill? And then, in a moment that would haunt Kha'Zix for years to come, the Excalibur fired a weapon unlike anything he had ever seen. A beam of energy that seemed to defy the laws of physics struck the Jakalar dead center. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like a tower of sand collapsing, the massive Jarun vessel began to break apart, its systems failing catastrophically. As the Jakalar died, taking with it the Jarun's last hope of a quick victory, Kha'Zix felt another new emotion for him: despair. It was more than just a tactical defeat. It was proof that the combined strength of multiple species, led by the humans, could overcome even the most formidable Jarun technology. In the aftermath of the battle, as Kha'Zix watched the human and allied ships begin to salvage technology from the Jar Kalar's wreckage, he allowed himself a moment of bitter reflection. The war was far from over, but for the first time he faced the very real possibility that the Jarun might lose. On the bridge of the Jacorum, Grand Executor Kha'Zix received reports of similar defeats across multiple sectors. The humans and their allies weren't just resisting, they were pushing the Jarun back on all fronts. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice hoarse. How is this happening?" Sub-Commander Kaljor approached cautiously. "Grand Executor, our analysis teams are at a loss. The humans' ability to adapt, to forge alliances, to think in ways that defy our logic. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered. For all our technological might, we find ourselves unable to match their skills." Kha'Zix's tail lashed in agitation. "No! We are the Jarun! We have conquered galaxies! We will not be defeated by these... But even as he raged, a cold realization settled in the pit of his stomach. The humans, these creatures they had dismissed as primitive, were proving to be unlike any other enemy they had ever faced. The Grand Executor stared out at the stars, his mandibles clicking softly as he grappled with this new reality. That they could really lose this war. "Status report," he growled, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. Sub-Commander Kaljor approached, his exoskeleton bearing fresh scorch marks. "Grand Executor, our situation is dire. We've lost contact with our forward bases in sectors 7 through 13. Our supply lines are in tatters, and we're receiving distress calls from..." A sudden alarm cut through the air, its shrill wail sending a shudder through the bridge crew. "Multiple contacts!" the sensor officer shouted. "Human ships, closing fast." Kha'Zix's mandibles clicked in agitation. How? How did they find us so quickly? He turned to the tactical display, watching as swarms of human vessels materialized from what should have been empty space. "Impossible! They're using our own cloaking technology against us." The ambush was devastating. Human ships struck from all angles, their weapons tearing through Jarun defenses with terrifying precision. Kha'Zix watched in horror as entire squadrons of his fighters were wiped out in seconds, their pilots unable to react to the humans' unpredictable attack patterns. "Evasive maneuvers!" Kha'Zix roared. "All ships, break formation and retreat to fallback point Ja'Kri." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was futile. The humans had anticipated their every move, cutting off escape routes and herding the Jarun fleet into a deadly trap. Ship after ship winked out of existence on his tactical display, each loss a stab of pain in Kha'Zix's heart. In the asteroid fields of the Hydra cluster, Jarun supply convoys came under relentless attack. Human ships, piloted with impossible skill, weaved through the dense field of space rocks, using them as cover and improvised weapons. Massive chunks of iron and ice, propelled by gravity manipulators, smashed into Jarun vessels with devastating force. Kha'Zix received desperate transmissions from his commanders across the battlefront. Each report was worse than the last. Bases overrun, fleets scattered, supply lines severed. The carefully constructed invasion plan that had seemed so foolproof now lay in ruins, shattered by the humans' inexplicable ability to adapt and overcome. "Grand Executor," Kaljor's voice was strained. "We're receiving reports of widespread comm failures. Our encryption protocols have been compromised. The humans are broadcasting on our secure channels." As if to confirm his words, the main view screen flickered to life, revealing the face of Admiral Mark Flanagan. The human's expression was stern, but there was no hint of gloating in his voice as he spoke. "Grand Executor Kha'Zix," Flanagan said, "your invasion has failed. Your forces are in disarray, your supply lines cut, and your technological advantages neutralized. We offer you one chance to save what remains of your fleet. Withdraw from our galaxy immediately." Kha'Zix snarled, his claws digging into the arms of his command chair. "You dare dictate terms to the Ja'Run? We who have conquered galaxies." Flanagan's expression didn't change. "Your past conquests mean nothing here, Kha'Zix. We've studied your tactics, reverse-engineered your technology, and united with species you never even knew existed. This is your final warning. Leave, or be destroyed." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Kha'Zix's mind raced, searching for some strategy, some tactic that could salvage victory from this disaster. But deep down, he knew the truth. The war was lost. "Grand Executor," Kal-Zor said softly, "what are your orders?" For a long moment, Kha'Zix said nothing. He stood on the bridge of the Ja'Corum, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the remnants of his once glorious armada. Each blinking light represented a ship, and there were far too few lights for his liking. The Ja'Run fleet, once a symbol of invincible might, now limped through the void of space. Then, with a heavy heart, he gave the command he never thought he'd utter. "Signal all remaining ships. We're retreating." The order sent shockwaves through what remained of the Ja'Run fleet. Ships that had been locked in desperate battle suddenly disengaged, forming up around the Ja'Corum as they prepared for the long journey home. As the fleet began its retreat, Kha'Zix watched the tactical displays with a mixture of bitterness and disbelief. The humans and their allies didn't press their advantage, didn't move to destroy the fleeing Ja'Run ships. Instead, they formed a barrier, herding the invaders towards the edge of the galaxy. "They're escorting us out," Kal-Zor said, his voice tinged with confusion and a hint of awe. "Why aren't they finishing us off?" Kha'Zix had no answer. As the Ja'Run fleet limped towards the galactic rim, he reflected on the strange species that had handed them their first true defeat. The journey to the edge of the Milky Way was tense, with Ja'Run sensors constantly scanning for signs of a trap or a final devastating attack. But none came. The human fleet and their allies maintained their escort formation, ensuring the Ja'Run's departure, but never moving to strike. As they reached the galactic boundary, Kha'Zix received one final transmission. Admiral Flanagan's face appeared on the screen once more. "Grand Executor," the human said, his tone solemn, "I hope this defeat teaches your people that the galaxy is vast, and no single species can claim dominion over all. Perhaps one day, when you've learned to coexist rather than conquer, we can meet again as equals." The transmission ended, leaving Kha'Zix to ponder the human's words. As the Ja'Run fleet prepared to make the jump to intergalactic space, he found himself re-evaluating everything he thought he knew about strength, about superiority, about the very nature of civilization. The Ja'Run had come to this galaxy believing themselves to be gods among lesser beings. They left humbled, defeated not just by superior tactics or technology, but by a fundamental difference in perspective. The humans' strength lay not in their weapons or their ships, but in their social skills and determination. As the swirling energies of the intergalactic jump drive began to build, Kha'Zix took one last look at the galaxy that had shattered his people's illusions of invincibility. The Milky Way spread out before him, a vast spiral of stars and worlds that would forever be associated with the Ja'Run's greatest defeat. But perhaps, Kha'Zix thought, this defeat could be the seed of something greater. Perhaps the Ja'Run could learn from the humans, could grow beyond their rigid hierarchies and isolationist tendencies. And perhaps the humans also recognized similarities between their species, more than they could have been imagined. The jump drive reached its peak, and reality itself seemed to bend around the Ja'Run fleet. In the final moments before they left the Milky Way galaxy, home of the humans, he turned to Kal-Zor. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we were wrong about them all along." Hey there again. I'm glad you've come so far. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to hit the like button and the subscribe button. This is really important to the channel. Really important. And I have one more thing for you. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.